All right, it is going now. So we are live with Alex Kazemi, the author of Pop Magick, and we've just been having a great conversation about the zodiac. So we'll keep it going. So do you think that there are physical traits that correspond to zodiac signs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can even see in certain faces that people kind of look like their elements. Have you found that as well at times?
Absolutely. Like I can recognize a Gemini's jawline, oddly enough. That's like the distinct one for me at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like it can manifest in different ways in your life, in different type of coincidences or patterns. Like there is someone I know who always points out that Sagittarius's she knows have blonde hair, and these weird type of physical characteristics that people see in their reality, whether we're like making it up as we go along as producing our own reality, or that there's fixed Sagittarian women who have blonde hair. It's very hard to figure out, but it's very interesting from theory.
That really is the most prominent magical question, I feel, as to whether or not the individual is in fact creating something or tapping into something pre-existing.
Yeah, I think that is something that if you do go down this path and you start to practice magic, it's something that you kind of have to investigate and think about, because the synchronicities and when rituals do work and how they align with certain moon phases and all of these strange variables, it becomes almost like a scientific method or a scientific experiment with nature. And how can you ignore this data? How could you just be a materialist and say this is not valuable data to what happened? And that's kind of, something about magic that people feel frustrated with, because they just want so much proof or evidence that it's real. They want factual evidence. They want to see it materialize right in front of them.
And I think that Crowley is really the first to really explore magic as a science. And he did extremely well. I think what it comes down to is that just like in real, or not that magical science isn't real, but in popular science, it requires extreme discipline. And people want, just like they want magic or they want to understand a book. Mark Fisher says, like, my students want Nietzsche like they want a hamburger. And it's the same way of magic and science, something that requires excessive discipline. You can't just do magic without a degree of self-discipline to even understand what's going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And discipline is the way to bring order to chaos. And you cannot produce any new outcome or manifest any idea or concept in your head without discipline. And you have to, the personal development guys are kind of magical guys, because if you listen to all of that productivity, self-discipline literature, it's kind of all based in occultism as well. There's a cross-contamination. And a problem I find in our current culture is that we've chosen entertainment and playtime rather than the self-discipline. And then that creates a lot of internal suffering and grandiosity in people that we then see leads to more suffering, because there isn't that ability to, really reconstruct the sense of self and rebuild yourself to have that self-discipline. Because I feel like self-discipline can be earned rather than, it happening overnight.
Absolutely. I think actually it really finds that the root of that problem in the brand of magic that has succeeded in America, which is the power of positive thinking.
Yeah.
It's distinctly Christian, and it's distinctly a prosperity gospel.
Yes.
And I think that it denies the importance of what you were describing, of reconstituting the self, that the self that we're operating on, even right in this moment, is most likely not going to be the self that is willing the great things that we are meant to do in our lives. We have to transform, we have to grow, And when you only focus on positive thinking, it becomes a negative feedback loop, destroying any potential growth.
Absolutely. And the problem with New Age positive thinking and the prosperity gospel is that they leave out action and real world application. And I think the reconstruction of the self can end up happening as you pursue those goals, and because you are faced with your true self. You are faced with the defective version of you that doesn't believe that you can do it. And all of that stuff starts coming up for you to alchemize. There's almost no choice. It's almost like a hero's journey or a Herculean trial or a Herculean task. And the way to do that is, to start that process is really to start to do what you were put here. And I feel like everyone has a purpose and everyone is here right now. And that does sound new agey sometimes, but you weren't just here to live in the matrix and live the 9-to-5 life. There's a reason, whether it's astrological climates or, the nature of your soul DNA and your chart and all of that. There's variables of why you like what you like. And the autopilot self, like you said, needs to be reconstructed. It just has to happen if you want to go to that next level, you want to ascend.
Absolutely. And I think, that's why your book struck me so well, because I always read any popular books on magic or witchcraft that come out, because I'm always curious to see, what are the currents that are heading toward young people. Obviously I put out my own currents of magical thinking toward people, but yours was the first that I thought got in contact, not just got in contact, but actually fully expressed most of what is absolutely necessary for young people to do. So I wonder, what moved you to share it, and why now?
Well, because I couldn't just watch everything go to flames, knowing that there could be practical solutions to apply to deprogram from society and to deprogram from the absolute consumerist slaughter of this addiction-ridden illusion Malkuth society that is all built around materialism and consumerism, and how I was watching a lot of my young friends and people wanting a sense of spirituality and searching for spirituality in all of the wrong places, and realizing that, this way of living isn't working. This autopilot self isn't working. The self-validation culture that social media promotes and all of this narcissism isn't really working. It's not going to bring us to where we need to go. And I felt like I kind of thought, I was like, okay, we're heading into 2020. How could I try to, give young artists, especially and young creatives, solutions of how they can create their great works outside of the content cluster out there, and to really create some kind of change within themselves. And I think, creating art is a form of magic, and taking that trip to materialize what's happening inside of you into the real world is a form of magic. And I feel like I've watched so many of amazing artists give up on themselves so to become Instagram art stars, and Instagram, they tweet all their best ideas, they Instagram all their fragmented creative ideas, they don't put things into scripts or movies or build go through that painful alchemical process of why they have that idea. They make the idea stillborn. And I found it to be so sad. And I wanted to figure out how we could create a place where we could kind of have solutions to deprogram from all of that.
I think it brings us to a really important concept, which is that the artists, the magicians, they want things that they make, and they want to feel relatable. They want to feel related to. And in doing so, they do, in fact, destroy what is individual about them. I agree completely. You need to build up your work. You can't waste it all. And, it becomes fodder, and it grows nothing. We are giving rise to a great deal of barren soil in the artistic community because, you know, it's expected to be useful as soon as it's said, ironically, because you have a lot of the people who are always deriding this concept of productivity and usefulness, but they ultimately end up producing nothing.
Well, yeah. Well, what you just said, yeah. Well, what you just said was so beautiful that, you know, relatability is the antithesis to individualism, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing. People are sacrificing their artistic individuality for ego, instant gratification. And, you know, a lot of people, we talk about the ego, you know, ego death, all that stuff. It's almost kind of become like a meme or an ironic thing, but it's really when you're feeding that image of yourself and that illusion of yourself, it's not real. It's never going to be real. It's always going to be holographic. It's always going to be an illusion. And I think giving up your sense of artistic integrity and creativity so that you can get a few thousand retweets or become cool or be a part of, you know, become a Patreon psychic vampire, you know, I think that's really weak. And I think we're not seeing young artists potential be fully developed because they're not given an arena to do that anymore.
Well, you know, I think a lot of it has to do with the pervasive nature of Christian morals on these young people. They are fixated on always remaining compassionate. They must always only feel love, always feel love for others. They must always be the problem. There can never be really any cause of their troubles other than capitalism, ironically enough. That's the productive force in life for us, unfortunately. But they deride productivity while embracing this kind of compassionate malaise.
I think it's I think it's performative. I think it's a performative compassion.
Absolutely.
It's a performative compassion, and I think it's way more malignant than we think. It's a kind of way of, I have to abide the protocol. I have to be virtuous. I have to be sympathetic. I have to be compassionate. Yet I don't have to actually do that energetic work of being compassionate to a person, being empathetic, being sympathetic. I can just, you know, tweet something that I believe will make me look good. And it's all about me and my appearance and my ego and how I look. And then we live in this strange world then how do you figure out what is inauthentic and authentic when it comes to expression? Is everything on the internet inherently performative because of where it's being done?
I guess the point just becomes when is compassion not performative? A great deal of moral philosophers would argue that nearly all expressions of compassion are performative in an ultimate sense. You know, it's only with the promise of a reward in eternity that people act compassionately. And it seems to me a great deal of magic, specifically within chaos magic and Crowley's system, is aimed at overcoming these cultural morals to obtain more efficiency. So do you not think that it might be worthwhile for young people to, you know, give a try to new forms of morality?
Yeah, I mean, I think young people need to stop abiding protocols and stop abiding dogma and stop adhering to consensuses. You know, even the occult community has their own dogma and consensus, and even the counterculture type people that we see in our culture are still abiding a sense of consensus, and they're afraid of losing that relatability and that connection with their audience and people. And I think this idea, it almost becomes, I don't know, fascist, but I think that way of abiding protocol, I think we as people can invent our own morals and our own society code. And I would hope it's not vicious or malicious, but we as people can do that. You know, the Christian morals do not dictate who we are. And when you escape those, well, actually, like you kind of said, those Christian morals are kind of spilled everywhere, even in art and the consensus of artists and the societal code of how you're supposed to act like and be like in public. It's literally everywhere. And the thing that I find to be the most disturbing is that when you see that type of hierarchical consensus in places that are supposed to be occult and supposed to be freeing, like free your mind, yet it's dogma. That's what I think is really dark as well.
Well, isn't this where it becomes apparent that there are, in fact, psychic vampires who dictate this countercultural dogma? They take over quickly. In the community of Thelema, for example, there's almost no original thought, and the original thought that does occur is derided as really evil. Ironically, they can never actually withstand the ideas that they declare themselves to believe in. They always need leaders, psychic vampires, to take in their desire and filter whatever aesthetic belief they have into a Oedipal, kind, family-oriented, good version. They never really interact with Crowley. They never interact directly with the texts they claim to be working with. And you see this in everything, of course. Nobody deals with the real thing. They have vampires, defending it. That's the real ivory tower.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And what you said about the regurgitation of ideas and how, like you said, there's so much opportunity to take and alchemize these ways of thinking that are in these books and creating new ideas. Hopefully the current world we're in will move forward into new ideas rather than, because I think it's a limited belief to say that there is no such thing as new ideas, because what is technology? Isn't technology a form of a new idea? Or a manifestation of that. I think we have to believe in original thought and creativity to see it be materialized. But that dogma and that protocol of Patreon psychic vampires, you're right. They're kind of like the surface level kind of dog in guarding the underworld. So I forgot his name. Starts with a C. Yeah, him. And they're kind of guarding the truth of what they're avoiding through the consumption of it. I think Red Scare is like a great example of that. This way of posturing as provocation and creating a rise out of people to kind of being a masquerade of subversion, but not actually doing anything moving us forward. Mm-hmm. But it's all about aesthetics and the look of it. And then I think that's kind of dangerous in the way memes are also dangerous.
I think, I have tried to do the opposite of that. And I think the great inspiration to that was Camille Paglia. She is somebody who is deeply provocative, but also a character in her own right. But she is not defending people from Jung. She is not defending people from Freud. She's not defending people from Fraser. She is, throwing them directly into the pot. And I think that is what makes a character provocative, rather than somebody who filters ideas to make them consumable.
Yeah, which is ultimately just being like a public hipster, like that's you just described like hipster dumb, like I'm going to be the filter and the mood board of that intellect, rather than sharing new ideas, creating my own theories. And Camille, some people compare the girls to Camille, and I find that to be very disturbing, because I think what Camille represents is kind of the antithesis to what the Red Scare girls represent. And I think internet celebrities in themselves can be such distractions, from doing that root source work of of investigating your inner self and connecting to yourself, because distraction is the number one thing that is killing everyone in our world. Literally, distraction.
So what do you think about how, I'm sorry, you cut off. What do you think about how so much of the sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a bit.
Oh no, I'm here.
My bad. But I wanted to ask, what do you think about Instagram art and how so many of the people are, rather than dealing with real work, rather than working toward new ideas, are fixated upon finding their own style, or they want to, they don't want to make great art. They want to make art that is unique to themselves, which I think speaks to the inability to deal with the big ideas. They might be really, really deeply just bad artists that lack technical skill. But so long as their style looks a little bit different from their peers, they feel justified.
Yeah, well, you just nailed it. That obsession in the new world art community of, I'm gonna, make my life look like a certain Sofia Coppola character, or Harmony Korine movie, or or even just post my art and create it to look a certain way on my digital gallery, and I'm going to build an audience and just live this life of the dopamine hit of instant gratification, be like plugged up to the Instagram IV, is due to the fear of facing the reality of what it's like to, write a book, write a script, make that album. Those real tasks that require technicality and practice and self-discipline, they're terrified of that. They're ultimately so terrified of that, which is why we see so many people using, certain new waves of media and expression as an avoidant behavior to doing that work that maybe very possibly their soul came here to work on. Maybe certain people were here to build, albums and movies and books and all this kind of stuff, yet they were provided with this distraction of Instagram and social media, and they said, you know what, if I can just tweet out all my thoughts and get retweets and get all these ego strokes all day, what's the point of writing a book?
A wonderful point. You put the right word to it, which is avoidant. And how many people, and this I find is the real issue. This is my big beef with YouTube and YouTubers. You get all these people who make videos, they get super famous, they make tons of money, but they do nothing with it. Nothing at all. It is ultimately an avoidant form of work. You can make the same unboxing YouTube video, the same, I don't know, toy video or whatever, and it avoids the necessity of actual individual artistic development.
Absolutely. And I think fame in itself in our culture is almost something that means nothing because of what we've celebrated as a mass culture. Fame used to mean your gifts were being celebrated. You had to meet a sense of consensus. Maybe there was a bit of gatekeeping, and sometimes, obviously there's been scandals and infamy in our culture for so long. But a girl taking pictures of herself on the beach and having like 7 million eyes on her, I mean, that's never really happened before in history. So what is the value of fame and having a voice if you're not using it for some type of, I mean, this is not moral, but I just mean from the way culture has been progressing, wouldn't you want to be the change? Wouldn't you want to move forward? Wouldn't you want to use your voice to affect people so we can have new movies, we can have new books, we can have new ideas?
Exactly my point. It's really bizarre to just see, what are people using the largest, most powerful platform in human history to do, and it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. So there's a really fantastic character who I feel in a lot of ways is a brilliant embodiment of some of Nietzsche's and Camille Paglia's ideas. Are you familiar with the Italian poet Gabriele D'Annunzio, uh, early 20th century character?
No, but I would love to hear about him.
It's really interesting. He was this fantastic poet and really the first of his kind to foster a cult of personality and to create a public theater of behavior. So I have a little bit to read that I just think would show why what he did was so powerful. Oh, actually, I forgot the most important thing. He, through his poetic tongue, got the public to bring Italy into World War One. After the failure of the war, he then started his own city, which was a home for artists and various political radicals where they partied endlessly for about a year and a half. Crazy character.
That's a form of magic.
Wonderful artist. Absolutely. But listen to this. Listen to what he did. They shaved off their hair. They grew little pointed beards. They wore white gloves and monocles and moved, as D'Annunzio did, in a miasma of strong perfume. One reported that officers ate candies and pursued the charms of women, all in imitation of their adored master. And noticed how florid and verbose conversation in Fiume became, as the acolytes strove to emulate the fantastic circumlocutions of their master. The bishop wrote, "The contagion of greatness was the greatest peril for anyone living in Fiume, a real contagious madness which everybody caught." Do you think that there is that kind of potential today for somebody who is so radically individual, such a powerful artist, that they could single-handedly cause real-world effects in the artist, in not only in artistic communities, but in the world in general?
Well, I feel like the great part about pop culture and art and having a mass voice, if you have established that type of audience, to create that kind of change. What he did and that archetype that he represents is what we need right now. And I would hope that there is someone at some point who will game the system into power to do something beyond Fiona Apple's "this world is bullshit" speech, and to do something that really wakes us all up. I mean, in a way that is authentic and real and true and provides us with the tools. I mean, I would really hope that we would one day see that. But from the way that our kids are being programmed in our culture and the protocol that they're being pressured into, and especially, the amount of pressure that young people have to perform themselves in such a strange point of their lives. They're building these TikTok videos and this documentation of themselves, and they're so self-involved, as young people are. But then there's this sense of you have to be a star also. You have to be performative. And I would hope that maybe one day someone could become as famous as Logan Paul and as famous as that poet.
I think that's what your book does. Your book provides a way for these young people to express themselves in a far more legitimate way.
And I think that's what they're aching for, because it's kind of like alchemy, right? It's misdirection. Because when you do those expressions, and if there is like a bigger alchemical process that starts with every idea, it doesn't hit the soul when you get the instant gratification for your work from making a TikTok or a Twitter tweet, or something like that, because, and also making a meme. There are certain people who literally dedicate their lives to running meme accounts, and that's their form of expression. And I think the way that we consume media is starting to become the media that we produce. And I see that as a big problem, because if our attention spans cannot handle the capacity of reading a book or watching a movie or consuming information in that way, and we want everything in these like spliced, fragmented, chaotic ways, it's not going to fully educate a person to their full potential at all. Like, well, I just don't see that.
This is kind of what your film spoke to, utilizing Instagram and Snapchat to make a coherent film, a full film.
Oh yeah. Mud Ditch Girl was a social experiment and a commentary, kind of a prescient prediction on where we were headed, on narcissism culture and meltdowns and faking things for attention and doing things for attention. And I felt like doing that in a real time way, and which some people felt was deceptive, but that was the purpose. It was to show you that you are always being deceived. And I just want more people to wake up to the fact that we need to interrogate our surfaces. We need to interrogate our consensuses. We need to interrogate the information we're presented with. And I would hope that we don't lose that. I mean, I don't think that should be a quality that is hidden. Like, why is that not more common? I don't want to believe that people are inherently stupid and social Darwinism and survivalism and all that stuff. I think it's because people are being told to literally confide themselves into algorithms, confide in the algorithm, confide in Netflix, confide in your YouTube sidebar. And there's no sense of free will in all of that. There's just surrender and making technology your false god.
I find that is what these people like Red Scare and such, people and Chapo Trap House, they make their living off of a kind of mindless hatred and critique. It's an endless critique. I don't know if you're familiar with like Kevin Smith, who made Clerks.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
But I feel like his critique of Generation X, it's just been accelerated in our generation. Where you have characters like Dante and Randall or Brody who go about kind of just complaining about life. We have accelerated that to just such an unbelievable condition where, instead of Clerks kind of being a sad story about these two guys just endlessly complaining, nowadays they would just put a camera on and then get paid tons of money to keep doing that.
No, exactly. You just hit on a huge thing. They're monetizing and holding the energy, time, emotions of a certain audience and exploiting them and hijacking their time through this materialist way of apathy and hedonism and nihilism, and trying to, it's honestly very pseudo intellectual. Like, I mean, that's really the truth of what it all is. And they monetize the pseudo intellectual of the masses. That's the person who, picks up a Nietzsche book once or people who love the imagery and the idea of themselves as an intellectual rather than actually thinking different.
So I'm curious, what got you not necessarily interested, but what was it that spurred you on about Red Scare? Because I'm not super into them. I listened, I think, to their podcast with Kantbot, because Kantbot's amusing. But what was it that got you interested in them?
Well, I study the cultural consensus and I watch what everyone's consuming, and I watch where the tides are going, and I observe people, and I was curious why people were into this. And I realized that a certain type of person in my life was consuming this. And I realized I wanted to investigate and figure out, what is this? And it ended up being kind of like vocal fry and performative provocation and kind of this weird nostalgia for a generation or generational idea of maybe Gen X or maybe the late 90s or something, a so far gone era of masquerading it as freedom of conversation when it's really just nothing. Like it's nothing. So when I see a group of people start to consume something, I want to study and figure out why they're doing it, and I want to investigate in that. And I found it to be very disturbing. And I find that a lot of people online and end up obsessing over people like the Red Scare girls, or in the past Milo, because they were looking for a sense of community, or they're looking for a sense of understanding in the worst parts of humanity and people, and it comes from a hopeless place. I don't know if it's similar to incels, but it's this online communal way of surrendering and giving up, and also championing giving up and celebrating it. Does that make sense?
Yes. Where do you see then a community that is vital? Where do you see worthwhile producers?
I mean, somewhere like this is great to start for whoever is here. This is exciting. This is cool. This is a great place. I mean, there's nowhere else on the internet with, the commentary and videos that you're sharing right now. It's hard for me to say. I would say the occult community, because at least you would be practicing magic and learning freedom of thought and having that type of camaraderie. But I think the occult community can also be based off of hierarchies and be kind of inherently narcissistic sometimes, and all of this false worship of Crowley, and rather than studying him as an archetype, more so people trying to embody him and as a way to feel power. But I would love there to be a true and real intellectual space and to have a discourse for the people who don't want to abide to the consensus that everyone else is listening to, the people who don't want to listen to Chapo Trap House or Red Scare or, whatever else. I like the New Models podcast. They're really cool. But I think that I don't really know if that space exists yet. Maybe we'll see it. And then, I would hope to see a counterculture emerge that has the real true values of counterculture. You like Terrence McKenna, Robert Anton Wilson, a real way of getting out of the system, rather than surrendering your identity and sacrificing it to be a Patreon subscriber.
I find worship of Crowley and worship of any thinker or form of thought is ultimately just a way of avoiding understanding it. It's a way to really separate yourself from it.
Wow. That's a beautiful analyzation. I've never really thought of that. And I think I also think the problem with that is that it also creates a structure in your sense of self and your view. You're saying, I have to surrender to you as my false god because you're better than me, which is kind of the antithesis to magic. Magic is literally believing that we are capable of doing what our icons have done, and we can do it maybe even better. It's a very big way of thinking.
I agree, but I think that an important point, because I disagree, I think hierarchies are necessary because people are ultimately incapable of self-discipline for the most part. Hierarchies and taking figures like Crowley and his writing very seriously for study and for work are the only thing that will allow that kind of work to be done.
Oh no, I agree with that. You're right. You're right about that. Because what you're saying is that hierarchy creates that level of inspiration in the person. If someone is above them, you can aspire to become like them.
Yes, rather because a lot of people, give lip service to being against hierarchies, but they have no results. They can't prove that a lack of hierarchies is more productive.
That's so true. Wow.
Do you think, rather than just consumption and people producing entertainment, do you find that there are any really potent art communities that are still around?
Um, I tried to find my tribe in young artists and art communities, and I tried to find that, and I'm not yet to find it yet because I keep coming across this way of just kind of like mood board art communities. Everything is around obsession and curation as opposed to invention and creativity and imagination. And how are we going to use these new ideas to bring our world forward? How are we going to create some kind of change? I don't really want to like immerse myself in an art community that is around being obsessed with David Lynch's short films. I want to be around someone who is saying that they're making short films maybe better than David Lynch. Like I want to feel like I'm living in the 2020s. I want to feel like we are moving forward and we're not living in this like wiki cut and paste internet art world. I mean, obviously every generation of artists has had precursors and inspirations, but there's such a way now to emulate because there's so much information out there that we've never seen before on our icons and idols, almost to a dangerous detriment.
What a great point. I find myself asking constantly, like, where the fuck is the future? Where, what happened? We didn't do nothing ever happened. We never did anything with all this wonderful information. And, so trying to form those kinds of art communities has been something that my girlfriend and I have given a lot of attention to. We've tried to kind of produce comic books, but with a new philosophy behind them, a new drive behind them. I think that comic books are some of the most horrendously afflicted mediums. The comics are something that they exist to be mindlessly consumed. Every story ever told in a comic is endlessly repeated and followed by literally thousands of other issues.
Yeah.
It's something that exists almost to destroy meaningfulness. So I've tried to do the opposite. And with her, we're both looking into the past to try and create the greatest possible current art.
Yeah, and that's an amazing mind state. And with that, the way to kind of get to that, the way of influencing people would be combining that, doing that work, doing that comic book with that prestigious divine will of, reaching out to people, sending out, maybe your manuscript or your comic book to big publishers or people, and knocking on doors. I feel like Madonna is such a great example of that, of someone who was so focused with one star pointed focus and saying, I'm going to do this no matter what it takes. And it's very hard for me to meet young artists who have I don't really meet people with very original ideas, but who have ideas, but they have no drive behind it. So the person who gets ahead of them is the one with the drive, and it ends up being the influencer or the YouTuber or the TikTok star, because their drive for fame and to be seen and to be consumed is greater than the person with just the idea. And that's what ends up happening. It has to be a combination.
What a wonderful point. Because, and I think this is spoken to in your talk with Vaknin, the drive of the narcissistic influencer is so strong. They need it to exist. The artist is so often, and I think that this is a problem. I don't think that this is a good thing. It just is. The artist is so often very sensitive, very emotional.
Yeah.
They care about what they do. The influencer does not care at all about what they need to do to get views, to get famous.
Yeah.
And they'll do it. They'll do it no matter what. So of course they rise to the top.
Yeah, and I think that neediness can be a part of some people's alchemical processes. You know, if you go through that neediness and you get to your goals and your dreams and you manifest it through that neediness, the neediness can then become a demon or something that needs to be alchemized, rather than having it to continue to be this destructive, insatiable thing. But you're so right, is that the narcissistic drive is so much about survivalism that it really pushes the person to go out there and get it. And, you know, I think a lot of artists can also masquerade themselves as sensitive and be secretly the kind of insecure narcissist who is very involved in their cluster B type personalities.
So I guess the point is really fostering a profound artistic drive, which might have to appear as narcissistic. I think that's what I think many people have realized today, is that you need to have that degree of ironically, artists need to do the opposite. Rather than the performative compassion we were talking about in the beginning, they need performative narcissism.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. You have to really believe that you're going to rule the world and that you're going to do it, and you're going to be the change you want to see in the world, and visualize and see your book sold everywhere, or, you know, visualize, you know, people's lives being changed by your work. I mean, you're allowed to have those things. I think the problem is that when you're not conscious of it, and it's in your subconscious mind, and it's driving you subconsciously. But if it becomes conscious, like all things in magic, you can gain control over it, and you can will it to your existence and use it. And I you know, you don't have to be deceptive or, you know, Machiavellian 48 laws of power. You don't have to, you know, crush people particularly, but you can figure out a way of where your will is so strong that you won't stop. I mean, I sent my manuscript to like 1,000 people, you know what I mean? Like I just didn't give up, you know, because I had to have what I saw in my mind. So it's that combination of doing the magic, but also doing the real world application of it. And that's how you can move forward. And I feel like if we do have these big desires and we want to make these big changes, you know, why not try to be seen on a mass scale, like the poet you talked about earlier? Because who else is saying these things? We know that the power of, you know, if I go on Coast to Coast and I get like all these letters after of people saying that their lives are changed and all that stuff, imagine if I was able to talk about magic or any of this stuff on the scale of like Logan Paul, or like someone who has like suburban audiences. You know, it's not like we turn on MTV and someone's talking. There's multiverses of reality now, and they're very curated realities. I mean, someone could consider you to be like a Carson Daly type celebrity in their reality, you know, and think of you that way.
And I think it really does come down to what Mark Fisher talks about, which is this kind of profound death of dreaming. So many people have become deeply hopeless, deeply caught within a kind of eternally traumatizing, but also ultimately comforting, in the deadening sense, reality. A nihilistic world where there's no point in dreaming anymore about anything. And the artist is so often caught there. The art is the only expression of life that they have. It's a defense against it rather than the ultimate expression of life itself.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. And I think you kind of just hit the nail over something, that it's because the mountain now is even bigger than it once was. It's a huge mountain to climb, to get seen, to self-promote. People don't even want to start to think that that it's possible, but it is. And it takes a few practical steps of using your divine will and accessing that, and, you know, ignoring the background noise in your mind. I mean, you know, I finished Pop Magick because I just thought I did like neuroassociative conditioning, NLP, with my brain, and I just associated all of that self-doubt with just like a TV being plugged out on white noise. And I was just like, it's just white noise. Like you can act in the face of that white noise, and you will prove to yourself that you can do this. And by the time I was done, I had a book, you know? So, but of course I had all of the voices, the doubts and all that stuff, but they were just cognitive distortions. They were lies. You know, we are capable of so much more than we think, but we hold on to this obsession with this defective self-image and society's conditioning and being like, well, that could never be me. Like that's for those type of people, you know, like, or like, I could never be that. I could never have that. And it's really just, we are our own worst enemy. It's very simple. You know, the beast, it's the beast within you. You are the Hydra beast and Hercules at the same time.
I think so much of it comes down to oh, sorry.
No, I'm not talking. I just moved.
Sorry. So much of it comes down to a denial of the ability to be both the Hydra and Hercules by denying the wholeness of what we are, by moralizing against what we seem to dislike. We ultimately are reducing ourselves to one-sided caricatures. And
oh wow, yeah.
I find a lot of it goes back to Wilhelm Reich and the idea of the emotional plague, where people have been infected and despise life. They despise their own life, their bodily living, and they despise people who are, when they look outside, they see people that are living, they hate them. So of course, I think this is a big aspect of the popularity of people who hate for a living. A lot of dead people like to listen to slightly more living people hate on living people.
Yeah. It's very no, exactly. And I think, you know, that dark night of the soul and that the emotional plague, I've been there with that molassesy feeling, and it was real. And you know, I know how that feels, and I know a lot of people know how it feels. But just the belief of knowing that there is the opportunity to transmute it, and then it can be done, and it's been done before, and people have felt the pain that we have felt about ourselves, about our work, about our possibilities in the world, and maybe have gone through worse things probably than, you know, our own individual experience. For some reason, it's not told to us. We have to seek it. We have to discover that we are greater than our own conditioning. And I think that's kind of, you know, a part of the root of why a lot of people go to magic, because you're in a helpless place. That the concept of magic even being real is like, you know what? I might as well, you know, like I might as well light these black candles. I might as well try it. Like what else? I have nothing else to lose. And that's how I got into magic a lot in a weird way, you know, like, and I think that dark night of the soul and that emotional plague is a part of the process. It's a part of the process, but the people don't understand is that we're given it to transmute it, to alchemize it. And like you said, it's the attachment to the identity of being one thing. I can't be the hero and kill the hero. I mean, kill the beast at the same time. I can't be I can't be everything, or I can't be the beast and the hero at the same time. People are just so unable to see their own dialectical traumas, and a lot of pain is self-induced. I've learned.
No doubt. You know, I think something about magic is so many people deride it as supposedly childish, just as they deride fairy tales. But that is exactly what gives it so much power. I find the same thing in terms of tarot cards. People who do not believe in it, or who are very skeptical, they tend to be the biggest believers after experiencing a tarot card reading or anything even slightly psychic. It's very funny. It's people who do not believe that have the biggest unconscious belief in something. So I think it speaks to the potential for people who do not believe in themselves or who don't think they believe in themselves to very easily tap into these great stores of energy. They just might not be able to recognize it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And would you say, like, do you feel that, there is an innate desire to connect to something spiritual, to find internal peace in everybody, like in a fixed baseline way? Or do you think some people just don't have that? And like you said, like, do you think that their subconscious behaviors is a yearning to have that sense of psychic connection or believe in something beyond the material? Like I would say from my own experiences that anything that I've used in the material world was subconsciously a way to find a sense of spirituality in the act of it.
Well, I agree. I find spirituality is the act. I don't think peace is the aim. Peace has not been my aim, and I think that the aim of peace has led to degeneration for the most part, rather than greater action. The desire for peace, Nietzsche makes a great point, which is often that the most, what is thought of as the most evil points in history have been the most progressive. They have moved humanity the most. So I do not think it requires, I think that it is the yearning itself and the elevation of yearning and desiring, wishing, loving.
It's wanting to go
hating.
higher. It's wanting to go from Malkuth to Kether and reach that state of that consciousness of like really feeling connected to something. I mean, a lot of addicts end up, and in 12-step and, religion and becoming Christians and connected to God. But the reason for that is because that template of spirituality was introduced to them in a very vulnerable point of their life, and a sense of higher power. They discover that through all the addiction, through all of the pursuits of obliterating themselves, was them actually trying to access their higher self, to connect to a God, to connect to a higher power. And I find in magic, when we do connect to a god or a goddess or an angel or a demon or an entity, whether it's a facet of our psyche that is a higher version of ourselves communicating with us, or something in the etheric world, it's really just about connecting to something past the self. And you can do that in a way that is non-dogmatic, which is why I wrote that chapter on how to create your own entities, because I got really tired of seeing, reading these magic books telling me what to do. Like I didn't get into magic to be told what to do. I got into magic to mold the fundamental spiritual traits that are, well, not traits, but practices that are spilled over all religions and spiritualities and great mystery schools and the mastery teachers, and just, find a bare to the bones way of taking it away from dogma, taking it away. And I've realized it's alchemy and magic. That's really what and ritual. That's really what it all comes down to.
Well, that's why I do think that the collective unconscious is the source of those, as you put it, aspects of ourself, but rather our self is an aspect of it. We're able to get in contact with these things that many people have, not because it's an element that is something everybody has, but rather we are produced by those energies, by the energies that form the world. We are formed by it as well, microcosm and macrocosm and such. So I do think that is why, and I think this is the same means to produce great art, is to recognize, just as with magic, what practices have always worked.
Yes.
You can look at the history of art and religion, and you can find,
yes,
and this is what Paglia did, find what works, what is innate to people, what can people recognize as
what they
great
can connect
or meaningful, and use that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love My favorite type of popular media is popular media that's not supposed to be popular. That is deceptive, that not deceptive, but that there's a twist or a turn or not a maybe a magic trick, you know, kind of like come into this world that you think you're getting into because of its like saccharine surface. But once you get in, it's a different, it's a whole different world and a whole different ride. And I feel like it's very cool to think that there was a time where Camille Paglia was on radio stations and on TV and educating the masses and people in their suburban homes and in their bedrooms. But I'm also very anti-nostalgia, and I feel like you might also be anti-nostalgia as well.
Well, I think what my most recent video dealt with is the separation of the ego, the head, from the body and the self into the internet. Nostalgia has the same sort of function, where you detach your ego and you really say, you know, I was really me at that point. That's really
wow.
me. You detach yourself from who you are when you become nostalgic. You say, that was something that was greater than anything I'll ever have. That was the real thing. This is all just, and you know what, you know, this is endemic in a lot of people talk about the Mandela effect. A lot of people talk about these glitches in the matrix.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate expression of the nostalgic religion, where we switched realities. The real reality was back when I was a kid. Everybody was nice.
Wow.
You know, this thing happened. Now everything is fake. Now it's all, you know, it's all bad and evil. It's wrong.
That's
no.
so true. Wow, that's so true. And what's so interesting is that, you know, collective Mandela effect of, and that BuzzFeed nostalgia culture and the way to think about that is that it's really people trying to connect to their idea of when they thought they were more authentic or real, or when the world was nice to them, or when it felt good. It's all nostalgia's all around. It felt so good, you know. It felt so good going to Blockbuster. It was so real. It was so awesome, you know. It was like I was free then, you know. Whereas it's really just creating an imaginary story that is relevant to your present moment to avoid facing reality and facing yourself, because all that exists is this present moment reality. I'm sure people will be nostalgic for COVID-19 at some point. And remember when everyone was wearing masks? Like, oh my God.
I wonder, you know, if it has to do in a way with a essential misrecognition of so just some of the comments now, some good, some bad, but one I thought, and this guy he's been commenting sad stuff the whole time, but he commented something that I really enjoyed this time, that he's always laughing because people never realize that they're acting. And I think, of course, this is true. I think that's the great Shakespearean insight, certainly what I experienced during my time as a Shakespearean actor, which is that it's all about cues. And people today do a lot to nostalgia. They're looking in the wrong direction. They are not looking at the cues that are occurring and telling them, like, all right, move on, next scene, you know, keep moving, keep living.
Yeah.
They want to stay, you know, sometimes an actor gets stuck in a certain position. They don't want to keep moving. And that's very dangerous. It will kill a scene. And I think this is what has been happening in life. People no longer know how to read the symbols, read omens in their own life, which are telling them, like, keep moving, keep moving.
You just picked up on something big, that people are typecasting themselves, like actors who get stuck in like being the scream queen or the hot guy, or you know, like we're staying stuck in our roles and our identity, and and maybe that sense of nostalgic connection or that seems to be relevant to the present moment, maybe because of the acceleration of technology. I think that scares a lot of people. Like I think really a part of collective nostalgia can also be the obsession with wanting human touch and connection and an analog era, and wanting something to be more simple, almost feeling like this is scary. It feels like AI intelligence are going to accelerate past me, and like I'm not a part of, you know, the bigger picture anymore, because, you know, transhumanists are going to outdo me and outlive me, and they're going to take over, you know. And it's that sense of fear around technology. But I think what you said is true. It's also being typecasted emotionally, right? You want to be stunted, you want to stay, you want that sense of safety, but I'm sure it wasn't that great, you know. And the person, I mean, when you were living it, people say it wasn't that great because I didn't appreciate it. So it's like, okay, well then just appreciate where we are now.
You know, it's kind of a denial of perhaps the greatest wisdom of God. I am what I am.
Yeah.
Nostalgia and these typecasts, they seek to give themselves up to some, you know, fictional type, rather than to embody what they are, to become what they are, which is to become constantly changing. And
Yes, you're right. And that Faustian deal is almost scarier or easier for people to stay in one way rather than to go through that evolution, and that real evolution when the actualized self emerges from the truth of who you are by being authentic with your essence.
And I think it speaks, you know, to go on with with touch and the sexual metaphor, which is that we need to look at, like, what role is reproduction playing? And it's no longer just genetic reproduction, but mimetic reproduction. If you do not commit to what you are and to becoming what you are, ultimately you are kind of a vessel for some alien meme, an alien idea which overtakes you, rather than you, you know, producing and reproducing your own ideas, thoughts, forms into eternity. You become really a product of your time and just another copy of a pre-existing idea.
Yeah, and I think this is something that I very much dislike about our current culture, very much so, of how people I think that memes, Douglas Rushkoff kind of talks about this, that memes are kind of brainwashing in the way that they kind of assign us a protocol of a way of reacting, and they kind of are saying to you, you know, look at this meme, react to it in the same way that I reacted to it, and we can, you know, be unified over this. And this is a sense of a connection, but also we're going to treat this meme as a fact rather than an opinion, and we're going to like worship the meme and share the meme, and, you know, find our unity over the meme in the group chat. And I think that that practice of that numb way of consuming is a part of this bigger issue. And people think I'm like a crazy conspiracy theorist for saying that, but I think that practice of that numb way of consuming, of saying, you know, a meme says my experience, or you know, that TikTok star, you know, mirrored back to me my experience, rather than interrogating that, questioning it, and being like, is that really me? People just go like, oh, me AF, that's me, you know, me. And, you know, I think that is a sense of it's like a social media Scientology, really.
And then you get really dangerous ones like I'm Baby. I'm Baby is like the ultimate evil relatable meme to me. That's the meme that really destroys selfhood in young people. It's like, yep, I'm Baby. I can't do anything. But there was a kind of like a continuation, a meme. It was like, I am no longer Baby. I now want power. And I thought that was the necessary and wonderful progression.
Yeah, no, well, exactly. And it's like, remember the
I hope
NPC
more
thing,
people.
right? Like the
Mhm.
oh, like NPC memes. But then all of those people, ironically, posting it are NPCs. They're programmed
Oh yeah.
to feel like I am the subversion. I am the counterculture because I'm saying that, and I'm the ego controlling myself. And I'm also, saying that by me posting this meme of saying that everyone else is an NPC, that puts me in a point of hierarchical power now in the structure, rather than actually doing something real and subversive. It's just, it's really like, it's kind of like people are living in VR headsets, like they're really
Certainly.
living in VR headsets.
My vision has always been to produce a counterculture. Something, because that would be the only way to witness the dialectic in motion and
Wow,
to
that's very true.
at least attempt to have some original thought. Like you have to frame yourself as antithetical to everything going on. And even then you need to have people who are antithetical to you.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we see like it's like look at the people who are like obsessed with Jordan Peterson. You know what I mean? Like if
Mhm.
you study like the way that a Jordan Peterson show is like with whatever person debating him, at an amphitheater, people act like the same way at like David Miscavige, Scientology, like they clap, there's this worship, and you really watch what Jordan Peterson is saying, and he's not really saying anything that's really revolutionary or of substance or very interesting. Yet there's this like dire like worship and oath and faith towards him. And the young boys who like spend like 72 hours of their weekend watching videos like that, and I don't think we've ever really seen a moment in culture where that level of curation, like kind of hacking the MTV and bending it to your will. It's like, at least you could turn off the TV, you could close a book, you could, now it's almost like we are being programmed to be distracted. And the question that needs to be asked is why? Why do they want us distracted? Why do they want us
Absolutely.
obsessed with entertainment?
The potential right now for unbelievable mass movement through magic is horrific if one were to really believe that it were possible. If people were capable of waking up in mass, it would be unbelievable. But a point I wanted to make, I think it's interesting you mentioned Miscavige, but I think L. Ron Hubbard is pretty much a brilliant look at a great magician. He did it. This is a point that I
He
make a
did.
lot.
He sure did.
We can't be moral. We can't be moral about it. We have to look like he did it. Like it doesn't
Oh, he
matter that we
sure
disagree
did.
with how, but he did it. And we can't win by thinking, well, I would do the right thing. I would do the right thing. No, you just have to do the thing. You can fix the morals later on, but you need to get the audience, you need to get the influence first.
Absolutely. And I think, he also took from Kabbalah, and he took from magic and psychology, and he created this
That's all that
system.
matters.
He took it all, and he built a system to control, and he went the distance, it's really dark to talk about, to say this, but he did. He willed it all into existence, and he's a part of our world history forever. He did it. He went the distance, and I guess that's a great example of the power of the mind and magic. I mean, and also the way of presenting something to a vulnerable audience. I mean, it's kind of like those Patreon psychic vampires I was talking about. It's kind of like a same type of exploitation of the vulnerability in the people who want to make that oath, who don't want to be who don't want to be producers of culture, but want to be consumers of culture. And they're saying, well, this is the culture I want to consume. I will pay for it. I will listen to it. And it ultimately, I think, is something that connects to a bigger problem that we're going to see this decade. I mean, what would you be optimistic about the 2020s?
Well, that's a great question. So I think to really respond to that first, I have to explain fuller, like, what sucks about the past to get to what's good about the future, or what's good about the present. Miscavige is an idiot who's doing nothing with the audience he's been given. After Crowley died, Thelma was destroyed. This is what happens. Great people make something, or powerful people make something, and everybody wastes it. What I have hope for is that we will get through, just by the vast amount of information that is in existence right now, and the vast amounts of free time that people have, is that we will get a lot of young people who know how to do things. When we get a bunch of people who know how to do things, they will be able to pick up the work that people like Hubbard, Crowley, Nietzsche left when they had died, and really do something with it. You know, I think that the best potential is a lot of young people who have a sense of efficiency, pragmatism, and a very strong vision and will. And I think that that is what hopefully I'm trying to foster. What you're trying to foster
Absolutely.
is young people, be starting to think that way.
Absolutely. And I think they need they even need to learn from a young age, like it starts to not be taught in schools, but, they need to have these outlets of realizing, hey, maybe instead of tweeting that idea, you could use something with that idea. Maybe you could take it further, because the problem is that they're programmed now on autopilot to be told to post all of their art to the internet, to do all of that, rather than, to do what Robert Greene would say, which would be to hone mastery in the art and then put it out. And that takes a lot of, like you said, discipline, pragmatism, delayed gratification. And I think the people with that real severe will and understand, like, okay, I'm not going to waste that 2 hours on, Instagram tonight or Pornhub or whatever, because I actually need to use this time to spend in the material world rather than in the virtual reality. And I think we're at a point now where people are getting a choice. Do you want to live in the internet and live on the internet? Because you have all of the content out there to spend 12 hours of your day watching TikTok compilations if you really want to do it. All of the opportunities are there, but there's also time, and it's non-linear and it's not fixed, and you can bend it to your will and be like, at 3:00, I'm going to choose what I want to do. And I think that's why time blocking is very important for artists in this next decade. Is really, really understanding your value of yourself, your productivity, your energy, and your time. Because any hour wasted in that simulation, in that virtual world, you're never going to get it back. And it's not ever satiating or giving you anything back. And the more you avoid those great masterpieces that you came here to create, or, you never sent that email to, that opportunity that you had, and you just avoid, it's going to get stronger. The desire is in your shadow self is going to get stronger, and the avoidance is going to get stronger, and you're going to be mixed with a cluster and a lot to untangle. And, to avoid that chaos and to bring is to know now, to start to bring the order.
Hmm. You know what I've noticed with time and with increasing order in terms of my channel, as the channel has become more, I would say, established to some extent, it's interesting how the increase in people who despise, what I have to say has increased. And I don't think it's just that more people who dislike it are watching it. I think that because more people are watching it, people dislike it. When it was early on, it was something that, kind
Was
of
theirs.
allowed people to engage. It was just theirs. They could engage with it a lot. So I find like the comment section actually on this one is the most negative I've ever had. Maybe not the most, but it's wonderful to see, exactly like why so many people feel the need to do it now. Now that back when I used to do it, we might get 18 people watching at once. Now that it's 52 people, that was the number, that was the number necessary to get way more people who do not enjoy it. But it's very interesting to see because so much energy is devoted from people into an object that is even slightly raised from the surface level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and their reactionary systems are their reactiveness is being pulverized, and hijacked by whatever emotion is making them so upset that they need to sit there and comment that and release that and have that sense of release. And I for some reason existing tend to create very extreme reactions in people, whether it's hate or love. There's never really a middle ground. And I think that's more telling of the current climate we're in. And also I think more so has something to do with how people are unable to interact with surfaces in a way that is separate from them. It has to be about their perception, their views, their feelings, and their dogma and their protocol, rather than being like, okay, I'm going to try to understand this, even though I absolutely hate it. And I think real empathy is trying to understand what you dislike and trying to understand what you disagree with and listening to it and listening to, what people have to say rather than denying them of that opportunity to say it. Like, I would love to listen to someone talk who I disagree with, because that's how I learn about them and I learn about that topic and I learn about that type of person. Like, I feel like the incel community, like nobody they kind of are used as this archetypal example for all of these bigger issues, but nobody's really letting them explain or talk or express why they've chosen this community, why they've chosen that level of apocalyptic pain and it's all over, rather than and providing a solution as well, and or even but they don't want solutions. They've made it very clear.
No, it really does always come down to really some of the most simple psychology. I find it really does always come down to a psychological aspect, and that's why I never I never ban people. I don't think it's a good idea, and I
No, it's
always
good.
do actually pay attention. I pay attention to everything that is written to and about me. It's very important to grasp what effect the persona has on the environment rather than reacting to it. And the kind of reactions that do occur can tell you much more about what sort of persona you are, what sort of persona that you have.
Yeah.
And, what Jung says is that, everything that annoys us in others is, something that we despise in ourselves.
Well, yeah.
It's
That's
always
like Kabbalah 101. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly.
So it's, I know when like 12 and 11, I think that was like the height of my trolling. Also, it's really amusing. I'll give attention to one bad comment, but one fellow has been deriding us as I suppose purely mental or purely artistic, but they, I think, fail to realize that the magic we're talking about is inherently physical and has a great deal of physical discipline necessary to enact such things.
Of course. I mean, magic could just be used as a metaphor for like athleticism and championships and training and going the distance for your goals, treating your goals like an Olympian would to get the gold medal. It's very physical, tactile work. We're not talking about sitting here and visualizing things and expecting them to happen. We're talking about combining the energetic experiment with the ritual and magic with the real world application and that real world will and discipline, and seeing cosmically what ends up manifesting and what ends up happening.
Absolutely. I enjoy, I befriend athletes because I enjoy seeing the strength of will in people. And, it's a great thing to perform willed acts with fellow, as Nietzsche says it, with fellow creators. It's not satisfying to be among people who do not have a strong expressive will, because really what can be done with people who do not, do not know how to express, really.
Exactly. And I've done magic experiments where I did a willpower spell on a Leo full moon, and I said, I'm going to go to the gym for 190 days. And I just wanted to see, like, from an NLP, NAC, just like from just or even an occult perspective, like, could I do this if I truly do believe it? And I am not going to listen to any subconscious programming, and I'm going to, any type of thing that happens in my schedule, I'm going to still try to make it happen. And I did it. And I proved to myself that I could do it because I wanted to test the powers of will. And I think when you practice magic, you start to play with the world a little bit, and you start to play with reality, and you're like, how can I test my willpower right now? Or how can I really check this out? And whether it's all, hypnosis on the subconscious mind, which is one commentary on people's theories on why magic works, or it's actual magic being manifested. And I, created that version of me, checking my momentum app and seeing 190 green squares, on the astral plane. And therefore it was all, then it just became written and something I fulfilled. We don't know. But, I think that my point of sharing that is that magic is really about will, and will is not just mental, it's physical too.
And isn't that the joy, I think, of becoming a child again? And what has been stripped of children in our generation is that magical ability. So often aggression or violence is, punished with children, when really, they should be allowed to express themselves physically. School has really functioned as a way to prevent people from physical expression, rather than, exalting it in the way that the Greeks did. And I think that is what magic does when you return to, when it's kind of a second childhood, where you have the imagination of the child, the curiosity of the child, and really the ability to contact nature and reality in the way that the child.
Yeah, and merge them together, and to become, a lot of people think the performance aspect of a ritual and getting really into it, and lighting the candles and all the sensory experience is a part of that awakening of the inner child. And I think that type of connection, whether it's the higher self or the divinity, whatever is bypassing that subconscious mind of the negativity and the judgments and the I can't, I will never, all of that, whatever is bypassing that, and whatever we're tapping into, whether it's an inner divinity outside of us or in ourselves, getting in touch with that will, if you can reach and access that place and sustain it, that is a very, very powerful, fulfilling place to be in, and to give yourself to. And like you said, that DBT mentality of expressing the emotions physically, because all of these emotions just want to be, redirected and alchemized. And, the NoFap community is a great example of that, like, of that sex magic alchemy. And I think that's also a great magical experiment to show yourself how you can, use this energy that you feel you're so constricted to, and you have no other release other than physical, and literally materialize something new out of it. It's very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think it's important to be able to have the discipline to not masturbate, but I think that ultimately the majority of people who do that tend to be reactionaries who despise sexuality itself. They are not doing it as an experiment in will. They're doing it as a means of killing their sex instinct. I do think that the disciplining of the sexual will is a great thing. I just find that internet communities always degenerate toward the worst possible interpretation of an idea.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, the people who are trying to castrate themselves of that instinct rather than, honoring it, seeing it as sacred, accepting it, allowing it to come in and to say, I want to test my discipline while also loving that part of myself rather than shaming it or creating a negative connotation around it, like you said that certain internet communities do. I do think that Napoleon Hill also was a big, person who was very interested in sex, magic, alchemy, and transmutation. And I think maybe even communities like the incel community or these anti-sex and movements online are kind of a way of creating a kind of black magic around, magic has no color, but a negative connotation around sex and sex energy.
Absolutely. And it works too. They are able to efficiently, destroy their own lives. It's a difficult thing to do. It's not easy to ruin your life, honestly. For somebody who is just living in the normal world view, it's really hard to ruin your life if you are in the normal incel position, which is probably suburban young man. But once you get a really effective mimetic virus that infects you, man, you will destroy your opportunities and destroy your potential very quickly. And they're able to justify it, And I think that that's unfortunately the role that science plays in ideology. It is this ultimate objective affirmation of some of the most ridiculous ideas and nihilistic ideals.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's so funny to think of how their lives and certain people's lives on the internet are such productions of self-sabotage and such productions of self-destruction and this will to destroy and to worship chaos and to destroy their lives with so much commitment when you kind of think about it and to view women as the enemy and to destroy the divine femme. And they have such a mission, it's such a mission for them. It gives their life a sense of spirituality and purpose.
Absolutely. And what a pleasure they must have in a world where really people are becoming more and more separated from meaningfulness and meaningful missions. They really do experience this profound magnitude of suffering,
Yeah.
much in the way that somebody who's experiencing like an Oedipal trauma, a very, objective archetypical trauma, they will have that same kind of pain. They feel justified by eternity. The
Oh my God, yeah.
has become justified by science and by the ideology. It's a really amazing thing.
Well, yeah, because
The question is just how can people like us? You go.
Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Well, what I was saying was what you were kind of getting at is that like, in a traumatized person, accountability of is something that they're terrified of, because if they've been factually victimized, it's very hard for them to escape the victim complex and to blame the outside world for what they're experiencing, and they get so good at that. And whether these incels or other communities have experienced real traumas, it's very much the opposite of magic. It's about staying stagnant rather than evolving. And I find that the most fulfilling part about being alive on this planet is transcending and ascending and leveling up and figuring out how to do that. I mean, I think there's some
the
innate
will to power. And, that's one of the great profound insights from Nietzsche, is that if you are given a person who takes on a negative ideology, of course, he's referring to Christianity, their will to power will have become weakened to the point where they can no longer create beyond themselves. The only thing they can do at that point is to die, to wish to die, to despise their body. And Nietzsche, or as Zarathustra ultimately says, go under. This is your will. You've made such a situation for yourself where it is impossible to grow anymore. Then go under. Die.
That's. I mean, I think we have to die multiple times in this life. We have to literally go through deaths.
Die daily.
Yeah, die daily. Absolutely. And I think,
that's something that's,
you can go.
We can continue the I'm baby with the infection of that. You have the, I'm going to kill myself. I want to die. Like, yes, you do. You want to die. You're not letting yourself die. You're not letting yourself shed your skin.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that shedding of the skin is so essential for, because you have to unmask a lot. Well, and I asked a friend, I go, why haven't you started to practice magic yet? Like you like, I'm interested. And she goes, I'm scared that I'm going to have to face parts of me that I don't want to face. And I'm afraid that I'm going to reveal too much about myself and reality that I'm terrified of. And breaking that barrier and that comfort is a part of the freedom and the appeal of going towards the occult and going towards discovering and practicing magic. And I think as you start to materialize the things that you want through magic and it works, the bigger goal starts to be rectifying the sense of self and healing. Well, healing's not a good word. Alchemizing, going within and saying, what are these autopilot, negative, horrible, destructive parts of me that I get possessed by? How do I convert that from negative to positive? And just the fulfillment of going through that process in itself is a form of magic for your life.
Well, the thing is that once you, and this is back to the problem at the beginning, once you find out those things about yourself, you are no longer relatable. You've then become an individual. You're in the process of becoming an even more extreme individual. And that has separated you on a very deep, profound level from the people around you.
Yes. And I was very surprised by the amount of people who, when I dedicated the book to people who have felt like they've never belonged in this world, and the amount of people who said to me, I've never felt that way. That was very interesting that you put that. And I was like, wow, that was really interesting to me to think of the idea that, is there such few of us who are seeing through everything, or is it bigger? And is the reason this stuff is occult and not mass is because the type of people who see this stuff and see through the material world and want to play with it and use it to their will. There's so few of us. And I found that to be interesting because I find that, alienation and, feeling like an outsider is why a lot of people get into cults and why they even cult friend groups and, go into a social circle. And I think ultimately, like you said, when we truly stand on our own as individuals and there is no more relatability anymore, our form of thinking and our internal dialogue with ourselves and our interests that are even surpassing, the weirdos and the creeps and the kids who watch David Lynch movies. And it's just at a point where it's like, no, like you're not a part of the tribe anymore. That's ultimately a very scary place for a lot of people to live in and to be. And it's the road less traveled is what they call it. And I think if you want to create something great in the world, I think it's honestly inescapable.
I am alone here. There are no gods where I am. That is one of Crowley's great bits, but I think that's really what it comes down to. All we can do, and I think the aim of my channel and of your book, is to become what you are, to commit to your own individual character, to take it to its absolute heights, to grow endlessly. I've had a wonderful talk with you, Alex. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And if anyone hated the episode or loved the episode, or if they read the book and they want they have any questions, I have an email because I don't have any social media accounts. It's fanmail@alexkazemi.com. It's very late 90s, but AOL era vibes. But yeah, if anyone has any opinions or anything, you can send them my way. Write me a letter.
Wonderful. All right. I've had a great time talking to you, Alex.
Thanks, Chris. Have a great one.
No problem. All right. So long.